Hi guys, it's Parsifal. I also go by Will, and I am back with another story time. I say this in a question mark because this might be a little bit of a rant, but I'm hoping that it's mostly a story time. Um, so I have been wanting to talk about my experiences as a tabletop DM and as a player for a little bit, specifically with people breaking certain, I don't want to say rules because I don't really believe in specific rules that are super set for tabletop unless it's like, you know, don't be a jerk to other people, and don't, like, you know, be a reasonable fucking human being. But it, I have mentioned before how I've run a couple of tabletop games, um, and I wanted to talk about a story that I have about a player who I used to run games with. Well, or rather, I used to run a game for and used to play with, and the frustrating experience that was. Um, but yeah, so we will call this player. Um, we will call this player Steve. And I apologize to any Steves out there. Um, this Steve is not indicative of any Steves out there. I don't know a Steve, so I'm just choosing that name. Um, yeah. So when was first getting into D&D, I was getting into D&D 4e. System doesn't really matter, but I was playing D&D online with friends. We were using Roll20. We were using Skype. We were playing online in the early 2010s, give or take. Um, and because I was in college at this point, and I've been out of college for like 7 years, and 6 years. But I've been out of college for a while, is my point. So it's been a while. And it was D&D 4e, and I mainly say that to talk about the era that we were playing in. Roll20 was popular to play on. It was around back then. We were using that one, and that one came with its own dice bots. Came with its own digital dice bots. This was before any of the big tabletop podcasts blew up, because that was mostly when 5e got introduced for Dungeons and Dragons. And I was regularly playing several games with this group of friends, and different members of this group would DM different games, and we'd have a bunch of different characters, but regularly it'd be the same group, just a different person heading the game. And one of the players was Steve, and for some context, while I mentioned that Roll20 does have its own dice bot, universal usage of that dice bot was not common etiquette around that time, or at least not for us, because it was still a new thing. We were new players, and we hadn't really played with anyone else before. So a lot of us had physical die. We liked rolling physical die, but it did mean that we were going off the honor system when we stated our rolls. And this isn't to say that I don't think anyone cheated with that system, but there is, to an extent, an expectation that if you are going to cheat, you're going to at least make an attempt to cheat well. In terms of, you're not going to make it obvious that you're cheating, because if you are cheating and you are caught cheating, it makes it less fun for everyone else, or at least it made it less fun for me, because I don't want to speak for all of the other players. But that was sort of the general consensus, was that we were using the honor system, and part of the honor system does mean that, you kind of have to expect that people are being trustworthy with their dice. Um, and, you know, we had understandable leeway for, like, oh, well, that sounds reasonable that you rolled this number at this time, even though maybe that wasn't actually what you rolled and you just told us a number. But we weren't going to call anyone out for cheating generally. Um, and like, this is also not even to say that the DMs weren't fudging rolls, because that was generally important for at least our gaming group, that we established, like, fudging rolls is okay sometimes because we don't want to TPK the party. Yes, it might be a way that some DMs were playing, but that's not the way that we were playing. And it was going all right with using the physical dice, until Steve kept pointing out that he didn't ever get critical failures. He was the type of player who would gloat about his successes and then complain if he didn't roll high enough on any of his other dice. So if he rolled a 4, he would try and argue that he should either get to roll again or roll with a different stat, or generally just not accept his roll. And if he rolled an 18 or a 19 or even a 20, and basically anything higher than a 16, he would gloat about how awesome he was, how cool his character was going to be, what kind of cool action his character was doing. And, that's fine to do whatever cool action you want, but it does kind of ruin it for everyone else when you are just gloating about how great your character is and how no one else can beat your character and how everyone else is doing crappy. And so eventually, when I was playing a game, I was DMing, and this has been going on for about a year and a half now, where Steve wasn't getting any critical failures, wasn't rolling nat ones, wasn't really rolling anything under a 5. And one of our DMs had said that on their next game they're going to require the use of the Roll20 digital dice system. And Steve threw a fit. He's like, I don't want to use the dice system. It screws me over. It is unfair, and it's rigged in the DM's favor. And the DM of that game, we'll call him Cat. Cat was like, listen, that's fine if you don't like the dice system, but if you don't play with the dice system, if you don't play with the dice bot, you're not playing in my game. That is my rule. And Steve tried to argue for this. Steve tried to be like, but I don't like it. It's unfair. Like, why shouldn't I get to use my physical dice? I've been able to use it going forward. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. And Kat was like, this is my rule. And so Steve used the dice bot, immediately rolled a 1 and a 3, and immediately threw a fit, going, see, this is why I don't like the digital dice bot. It's so unfair. And this was the first nat 1 that he rolled in several months, if not the entirety of our games. And then he rolled another nat 1 within the next 10 minutes, and he was just super upset. And, this wasn't a major problem. We just kind of continue out as normal, but it really should have been a bigger red flag than it was. And it wasn't a problem until I was DMing. I was DMing a one-shot, and I allowed him to use his physical dice, and I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have knowing that, but would have, should have, could have. Hindsight's 2020. I can't tell the future. And he rolled 2 nat 20s in a row and said, "Ha ha ha, it's almost like my dice are rigged or something. I think that they're rigged because I don't ever roll anything bad with these dice." And I'm the DM. And I say, "If you think your dice are rigged, you're using the dice bot." And then he starts complaining. It's like, why should I have to use the dice bot? I don't want to use the dice bot. The dice bot's unfair. And I said, "You just admitted to thinking that your dice were rigged. Regardless of if it's true, if you think they're rigged and you continue to use them, you are using, or at least you think you are using, rigged dice, which is cheating, which is unfair to the other players who are also trying to roll and have to use the dice bot or their own dice and are not cheating. Or, not that I said this, but at least are cheating better and not getting caught." And he just threw the biggest fit, like the biggest fit, as if I had just insulted his family and all of his children because I told him that he wasn't allowed to use dice that he believed were rigged. And so I pulled all the other DMs into a conversation. I said, "Are we letting Steve play with rigged dice? He believes they're rigged. He refuses to change them. And, like, it is unfair." And eventually I left that group. Because, not just because of this instance, because of a lot of other things, but one of the factors was when we had this conversation, all the other DMs said, my game is story-based. It's not combat or role-based. So I think it's fine if he uses his rigged dice. It doesn't matter to me. And I understand the concept of that. But as a player in those games, as someone who was playing in those other games with Steve, it was just not fun to be playing in a game with someone who I know has rigged dice and consistently brags about how good his rolls are when he has admitted and he thinks that his dice are rigged. So that was just unpleasant, and I left the group for multiple other reasons besides that. Not at that time, but at a later date. But that was definitely one of the reasons that I did leave that group. It just wasn't fun. It's unfair and not fun to be sitting here playing with fair dice, or at least fairer dice, excluding certain fudges, when someone is admitting to playing with rigged dice. It's not fun, especially when he rubs it in everyone's faces. If he was at least somewhat quieter about it, I think I would have been okay with it. Like, if he were, if he were, just rolling high rolls and he didn't say anything to anyone about how cool his character was, I don't think I would have noticed. I don't think I would have cared. But he was obnoxious about it in everyone's face, and it just made me feel like he was using his dice to lord his power over everyone else, and that it was a power trip, and it just wasn't fun. No, after that, knowing that. So now, if I DM things, I require use of robots, or at least some sort of screen cap to prove that someone has rolled what they proved to roll, or something like that that is a reasonable thing to ask for. And there are ways to get around that in my systems, certainly. I am a little bit more lax than some DMs that I know of. I will accept screenshots or photos with a timestamp for a roll, and sure, you can edit those. There's ways to get around that I'm not going to say, because I don't want people who may be playing in my games to try and do that. But it's not flawless, and I don't intend it to be flawless because I don't want to, you know, entirely fuck over someone else's fun. I just want things to be fair to all players in a sense that it's not going to make them feel like what they do doesn't matter. Um, but what about you guys? Have you guys had any weird, crappy D&D experiences with people who cheat at their games or who are just obnoxious with their roles to the point that you just don't want to play with them anymore? Or any other tabletop system? Because I actually don't really play D&D anymore. I play other D20 based systems, but my favorite system is Powered by the Apocalypse, which is a 2d6 system. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. And until then, I will send you guys to the outro. Bye bye.
Well, that's the end of this video. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section or contact me on any of my social media, which is linked in the description below. I also have my Patreon there if you guys want to throw a monthly donation at me. Thanks so much for your support. I'll see you next time. Bye!